nice to be back here. I am Adedoyin Olutade, and in the previous video I was explaining concepts in literature, and I'm going to continue to be able to finish up everything that we have under the new syllabus for literature in English for the 2026 UTME. And do not forget that this project is brought to you by CMRC under the Free Sussex project. So in the previous video I explained things around the genres of the newly recommended text for UTME. I was able to explain texts around, I was able to explain the drama text, the African drama text, that's Marriage of Anna Selma by F.R. Sutherland. I was able to explain the non-African drama text, that's William Shakespeare's Antony and Cleopatra, the non-African prose work, which is part of Lucas' The Journey Endured by Susan Bellefield. And I also explained, I also provided insights on all of the African poems and the non-African poems. But then there was a part I couldn't treat yesterday in the previous video, and that's the part relating to the African prose text. And under the African prose text, you have two. We have So the Past Does Not Die by Pediolist, and then Redemption Road by Elmer Shaw. Now, for those who are new to this text, I explained in the previous video that these texts are new texts that have just been recommended by JAMB for the 2026 to 2030 UTME. And previously, there were some set of texts that were used for the 2021 to 2025 UTME. But from this year on to 2030, new set of texts are going to be used for the examination. And if you've not gotten a grasp of what all of these texts are about, do well to go back to the previous video to get a nuanced understanding of this. So I'll just get right to it immediately. I'll get started with So the Past Does Not Die by Pediolist. Now this work by Pediolist, a Sierra Leonean, just expounds on the idea of self-identity, because almost throughout the text you find that something remains very much pertinent, and that's that idea of how the central character in the work, Finaba, tries to find herself despite all of the things that have happened to her. While she was very much younger, her grandmother, Baramusu, wanted her to be part of a sort of initiated women, and the women get initiated majorly because they've gone through circumcision, female circumcision. But Finaba's father and mother were against this, because it was the circumcision that eventually led to the death of Finaba's elder sister, Jimusu. And due to that, the family have been very much skeptical about it. But the grandmother, that's Amadu's mother, the mother-in-law, doesn't like her daughter-in-law, majorly because her daughter-in-law is not one of the initiates, but she wants Finaba to be initiated into this culture or this realm of women who have been circumcised. And when the grandmother comes to visit to discuss this with the parents, they do not agree to it. But at a point we get to see that the grandmother adopts Finaba and then takes her to the Fafe, which is the initiation house. But midway, Finaba's father comes and then disrupts everything and then takes his daughter away. So at that point, they were unable to complete the initiation ceremony. And you will see how that singular action at the beginning of the work characterized the entire life of Finaba, majorly because from that very point, she was seeking self-identity, trying to find herself, trying to really make sense of what she's doing, amongst other things. And it's worthy to note that for this text, the beginning of it had a sort of, there was a prologue and there was also an epilogue in the text. The prologue tells us a story about an all-woman town that exists just for women, and people are, even if men come into the town, they have to leave before nightfall. But there was a certain child that was given birth to, who wanted to really know what would happen if men stayed there beyond the night. And then she did a whole lot of things that went against the norms of the persons who reside in this society. And as such, she deviated from the path, and the path died in that prologue. So you'd see how this prologue, or this folk narrative that is provided in the prologue, got to characterize Finaba's life throughout. Because after that period, Finaba, her father and her mother they left where they were residing after a lot of things happened in between, where the initiate, headed by the grandmother, they come around to the house and then they want to cleanse the house, laying curses and all of those other things. So eventually, the family leaves the town for another place. And while they get to the new place, Amadu's uncle was able to help with quite a number of things, and they were able to get going. But it got to a point. Amadu died. He died of tetanus poisoning. He got a job as a security guard, and he was also assisting at the construction site. But at a point, he started stealing some properties from the construction site and was using it to enrich himself. So he was able to get an apartment and do other things. But on a particular day, he mistakenly stepped on corrugated sheet, and that made him get infected with tetanus. And after that happened, he didn't get it treated properly, and that eventually led to his death. So after Amadu's death, the mother had to take care of Finaba, and Finaba also has a younger sister who goes by the name Isa. So all of these things had to be done, and the person who offered Amadu a job earlier decided to take Finaba in as one of his own worker, so as one of his own children. So you see how Finaba eventually was involved in a whole lot of things. It took time for her to get acclimatized with the environment, the house, and other things. And eventually, she finished and then she went to the college. When she got to the college, she experienced some set of things around racism. How people are really not so accepting of people of a certain tribe. And the roommate she had while she was in Crowder College at the time was a person who was being maltreated by her boyfriend, but she could not speak up. And even at the point where Finaba wanted to speak up, the boyfriend used the idea of tribalism against her. And it's also worthy to note that Finaba did not finish at Crowder College. She had issue with a certain course, organic chemistry, and she was looking for a way to just pass the course. So she started meeting with lecturers, meeting with lots of individuals, but some appeared very stiff, others wanted to have their ways with her and other things. But eventually, there was this particular guy, Kizzy. He was more like a lab assistant in Crowder College, and he decided to help her. A night before the exam, she went to his place, majorly seeking the questions for the exam. But eventually, he harassed her, but she was able to make her way out. And she left the college and even left her home without looking back. So she had no certificates to just prove that she went to college at all. And that was almost at the time when she was meant to graduate. So Finaba started a life trying to do things, put a lot of things together. But then Finaba has one main thing in mind, and that is to travel to America. At a point, it was even a dream to become a medical doctor. But all of these things started changing. She was working with a certain health organization that was headed by someone who is from the United States but was born in Sierra Leone. And after some time, Finaba was able to get opportunity to move to the United States. And when she moved to the United States, a series of activities started taking place. She was trying to get a degree, was also involved in numerous jobs and all of that. And then she had this friend of ours who was able to assist her with certain things that she wanted to do and all. Eventually, because I'm just trying to see how I can shorten the narrative to bring out the proper messages. Eventually, Finaba got married to this individual, Kami. But before the wedding, Kami happens to be a surgeon. Before the wedding, or during the wedding actually, a truth got revealed. Finaba found out Finaba had married somebody earlier just to be able to get a residency card in the United States. And then she divorced him, but while she divorced him, he was not around. And he came to the wedding. At the moment when the presiding minister asked if there was anybody who was objecting to putting or joining the lovers together, the individual stood up and then he brought an evidence to prove that he was actually married to Finaba at the time. So the wedding got scrambled, Also, another thing happened. The same Kizzy who assaulted Fina when she was back in Crowder College is now the husband of another character known as Edna. And that Edna is the daughter of the person that took Finaba in. Edna and Finaba grew as sisters. They are around the same age. They grew as sisters. And then the secret is still unspoken of. Fina knows the truth. Kizzy knows the truth. But the both of them are making very conscious efforts to just avoid meeting physically to discuss these things. So after the failed wedding, Finaba wanted to go back to her home country, but Kami wanted her to stay. And while this Finaba secret came out, Kami also found out that while he was younger, when he lost his elder brother, the moment he decided to go away from being a morally upright individual and became promiscuous, he got a lady pregnant, but his mother did not accept it at the time. But now that son has now come back, and the son is stating that he is back majorly because his kidneys are failing and he needs his father to donate. So at that point, Kami also realizes that he has a son. So eventually you see that different efforts were made. Kami eventually donated to be able to save the life of his son, and aside that, other activities took place. Finaba went back to Sierra Leone and then was looking for a way to connect with her grandmother, but everyone she was reaching out to said the grandmother was nowhere to be found because there was even one in Sierra Leone at the time. But of all of these things, that eventually happened, Kami was still interested in getting married to Finaba, trying to make it work. And it was also during this period, because before Finaba left the United States, she was already pregnant for Kami. So she had the daughter in Sierra Leone. Fina and Kami eventually met again in Nigeria when they came around for Edna's wedding, because Edna was getting married to Babalola, a Nigerian who traveled to the United States to get a medical degree. So they met in Nigeria and they discussed, then they went back to Sierra Leone where Kami saw his daughter. And then the last part of the work now shows us how the family is now living together, because Kami has decided to make that very conscious decision to state that he really wants to have a family with Fina. So throughout the text, you're going to realize something, and that is the significance of the title itself, So the Path Does Not Die. You'd realize that it got to a point in Finaba's life while she was in the United States. She felt a sort of chasm, a sort of vacuum in her. It had gotten to a point where she was very much accomplished in the United States, had bought a townhouse for herself, was doing comfortably well, but the happiness was still not there. She felt out of place. You know, earlier I explained something around the idea of self-identity. So she felt out of place for a very long time and thought it best that the only thing that could really make her happy or make her someone of purpose is to go back to Sierra Leone. So one thing you should pay attention to is the significance of titles of works that have been recommended. So for this one, you find out that Finaba tries as much as possible to stay on the path to ensure that what is customary, what has been a sense of purpose that should drive the way she lives her lives and does other things, stays on point and stays in tune. And that's what you majorly find in So the Path Does Not Die by Pediolist. So that explains So the Path Does Not Die by Pediolist. So moving on to the next one that we have here. This is Elma Shaw's Redemption Road. So for Elma Shaw's Redemption Road, the first thing you should note about it is that it was published in 2008, and the novel majorly talks about the Liberian Civil War. The Liberian Civil War was a war that took a lot of years. It was two. There were two wars actually. There was one from 1987 to 1997, and then the second one took place between 1999 to 2003. So all of these things happened, and during this civil war, lots of individuals got displaced. Elma Shaw wrote this novel in 2008 to just talk about how the characters in this war, a major character there, Benry Lewis, a major character there, let me just get this. How the major character, the protagonist of the war, Benry Lewis, had undergone a lot of hardship during the time of war, that our experiences have really been shaped by a lot of things. And Bendu Lewis owns a non-governmental organization called Peace in Progress. She runs a non-governmental organization called Peace in Progress. And the non-governmental organization operates in a way that it's meant to rehabilitate individuals who have been traumatized by war. At the beginning of the novel, you see that the family had a gathering. And at that gathering, Bendu's grandmother it was Bendu's grandmother's memorial service. But at this memorial service, 10 years after the woman had died, her body was still not found. Majorly because Bendu and the grandmother were together. They visited a relative. But while they were leaving, they were accosted by some rebels. And in a bid to escape, she was pushing her grandmother in a wheelbarrow, because her grandmother could no longer walk. And eventually, her grandmother died. But then the rebels got to her, and while she was trying and making so much efforts to still carry the corpse of her grandmother, she was told to leave the corpse of the grandmother and then just follow the rebels. And she followed these individuals and she became a part of them. That was how the corpse of her grandmother could no longer be found. So even way after the war, after the war had subsided and everybody has gotten back to normal, Bendu still feels as though her family sees her as being guilty of what happened, being guilty of the fact that the grandmother died and her corpse could no longer be found. And there was a particular individual who really traumatized during this war. He was the commander of the rebel force. He goes by the name Commander Cobra. Commander Cobra. And later in the text, after the war, you realize that he takes on a new name, and that's Mrs. Vanny. He takes on a new name, Mrs. Vanny. So please don't get it confused. Whenever you find Mrs. Vanny and you find Commander Cobra, know that it's talking about the same individual. And he has rebranded, and you see that he's doing a lot of things within the post-war Liberia just to be able to set some things in motion. And having changed his identity, he comes to Monrovia, and Monrovia is where Bendu stays. Bendu is in Monrovia running NGO where women are brought in, they are rehabilitated, they share their experiences, and way forwards are provided to things and issues that have affected them during the war. And on a particular day, Bendu was out. She saw Commander Cobra, but he didn't see her. And the moment she saw him, it brought back the entire memories of the war and how she was traumatized. For a few days after that period, she could not leave her house, but she just had to stay. And the day she decided to leave, she was going to a supermarket. As she was walking, he suddenly called her. And he called her by, she had a one name, and that was Lieutenant TKO. She had a one name, Lieutenant TKO. And he addressed her by that. And the first thing she had to tell him was that he should not call her by that name because that is not her identity. Majorly because that was a name she had during the war. So you would realize later on that although Bendu was forced into this rebel force, she had to be indoctrinated to their activities, where eventually it became a sort of dog-eat-dog society, where it's either you kill or you get killed. So she was part of the Women Auxiliary Force, and she rose up to the level of being a lieutenant, meaning she killed individuals and diverse other things happened. And after he met stays in. And from that moment, Bendu just made up her mind that she was really going to look for a way to prosecute Vanny, that's Commander Cobra, for all of his war crimes because she doesn't want him to go away with it. She reaches out to appropriate authorities, the police, and then, for example, the lieutenant of the police was Lieutenant Tapa, and then she is told that she cannot, there's no war tribunal in Liberia, and then she cannot prosecute for war, majorly because there are no casualties that she can prove, no evidences, and other things. But the moment Mrs. Vanny, that's Commander Cobra, realizes that Bendu is on him, he now decides to take decisions and then do things to be able to protect himself and also were happening. It even got to the point where protect her. Calvin was referring to Bendu's elder brother, that's Benjamin Lewis. Benjamin Lewis elder brother's death was that while all of the children were at home with Calvin's parents, some set of rebels came into town. That was in 1980s Liberia. They came into the house and then they took